everyone, and welcome back to Handing the Shame Bag. This is a channel dedicated 100% to adult survivors of child sexual abuse, and I am Glory Masters. I'm your host. For those of you who have been with me for a year now, thank you so much. For those who have joined recently, welcome. Lovely to have you on board. One of the things I've noticed with the channel is that people are looking for content around how to support survivors, and I'm very excited today because we're going to be interviewing someone who was a partner of a survivor. So just before I introduce you, I'd just like to say, fabulous people out there, that if you feel at all triggered during the watching of this show, could you please stop watching, go to the show notes below, and you'll be directed to some help and resource. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce you all to Lee Underwood. Now, Lee is a supporter of a survivor. She's an ex-partner of one, and very grateful to have her with us. Welcome, Lee.
Thanks, Gloria.
Awesome to have you here. So I introduced you as an ex-partner of a survivor, and I imagine some of what you saw might have been quite challenging at times and confusing. I'm just throwing words out. But I guess there would have been some beautiful moments and some really challenging times as well.
You're right.
Yeah, so are you able to share with us what you kind of noticed, or I guess what the biggest challenge was for you?
Right. So my husband had been abused when he was young. So we were married. We'd been married for about a year, and we were out one night and things just went really strange. There was just this real tension, and the night was not going well. And we actually decided to leave the function that we were at, and we thought we'd go up Ponsonby Road and have a drink somewhere. And I parked the car, and it was just, he was just off. And so I really kind of pushed him, like, what's going on, what's wrong? And he just blurted out that he had been abused when he was a child by a neighbour. And I always felt like it was like a boil bursting. It was just so traumatic for him to tell me. He immediately left, like fled, got out of the car, took off. I was in shock, and he found it very, very hard to tell me. So after that, we managed to have talks about it, and I found out who of his family members knew, and then I knew I had some support from them, from his parents, which was good. But I also started to see that, they were, oh, it happened a long time ago. It's all in the past. There's nothing more we can do about it to help him. Yes, that happened. It was terrible, but we've all moved on, And the more I spoke to him, he acknowledged that wasn't really helpful for him, and he hadn't moved on. He hadn't been able to move on. He hadn't done any work around it. He'd really hadn't told anybody in his life. There was a lot of shame and denial. And so my first reaction was, well, let's get some help, and, let's do something about this. And he was just like, no, I don't want any help, and I don't want you to tell anyone. And that was a big issue for me, was that here I had this terrible secret that my first response was to try and help him with it, and I couldn't. So I couldn't talk to anyone about it myself. And so it became kind of my secret too. And yeah, that was it was very difficult.
And it's interesting, you've raised so many things that are hallmarks for survivors, but hearing that you yourself as a supporter had to almost become complicit in the silence around
Yeah,
it just shows us how, or reinforces, Lee, just how there's just not an appetite to hear this stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
Shame.
So I eventually realized I had to tell somebody, someone that I knew. Like, I was able to speak to his mother and father, but they were older people. They were not able, they felt a lot of guilt themselves. They were involved in it. And I wanted to talk to someone who was maybe someone that just could help me then help him and wasn't involved in the whole situation. Yeah. And so I eventually did choose somebody. I chose one of my family members. I told him that I just had to, they would not tell anybody, but I just said to him, this is affecting me. And of course it was affecting our marriage, because he couldn't trust anybody and he couldn't trust me. And he never did trust me in our marriage. So I had to tell someone. So that was one time I stood up. I did stand up and say, this is something I have to do.
Yeah.
But really, I felt an incredible sense of loyalty to him not to tell anybody else.
Yeah.
And, even after we'd split up, I didn't mention it to people for years. It was this incredible. He was telling people. Eventually, he was telling people what had happened to him, but I still wasn't. It was just ingrained in me to
No.
keep quiet.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, and you were being respectful. You were trying to support your partner or your husband at the time,
mm,
respecting his wishes and giving him
yeah.
the autonomy over who knew and who didn't. And I think that's beautiful. But I'm also starting to look at the impact that must have had on you, because if you're the one carrying the secret with and for him, that weight, I imagine.
Mm, yeah, because I was getting frustrated because I actually wanted him to press charges because we were pretty sure these people were still alive, the perpetrators, and I wanted him to A, press charges, and B, get help. And he didn't want to do either. And of course, I had to accept that. But at the same time, I found that quite difficult
Yeah.
because I could see it was affecting our marriage, and I couldn't see how we would be able to move on, and really be close until he had done the work.
Yeah.
And he got very close to it. He said he was going to do something, and then he backed out, and then he was going to do something else, and then changed his mind, and it just kept happening like that until I realized nothing was going to happen. And unfortunately, he could turn things around, and he said to me once I was making it all about me, which was very, very hurtful to me. I was certainly not trying to do that, and maybe it came across that way, but there were some things that were said that were quite hurtful, so it was impacting our relationship for sure. Mm.
Yeah. And I guess too, when you consider it, you, because you were carrying the secrets, and we know secrets make you sick. It's actually, I can see the impact in the different ways it would have impacted your marriage and your ability to be close. I think one of the things that may not have been realized, because he was choosing not to get help, therefore felt unable to, is this, Lee, and it's surprising to supporters of survivors, but I think you'll get it. As survivors, to do something like discuss it takes us straight back to the age we were when the abuse happened. So even though we may be in the adult body, we've actually regressed right back to being that vulnerable, targeted child.
Right. Yeah.
Just know that you never were dealing with an adult in those moments.
Right.
Secondly, for him to think about that, but then for him to ever be able to find the confidence to press charges again is like a small child being able to challenge or push back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he intellectually, and look, I'm not an expert, but I just know for me, it took me straight back. And from listening to other survivors, it's surprisingly, I know,
Mm.
that can actually be what we can be left with when we
Mm.
start to talk. So
Yeah.
I guess the issue is there wasn't room in a way for you in that marriage.
Mm. No, no. And I wish yeah, I just felt very alone and incapable of helping.
Yeah,
I didn't know things I know now. I got books out of the library. That was about the only thing I could find at the time, because this was 20 years ago. So, there would have been help online, but I didn't know
no.
really that there was. um, and I had to be so careful what I did to not upset him as well. In the end, I kind of tucked it away like he had done, for quite a few years. It just never got discussed. And it was almost like he hadn't told me, and the family all went back to normal. It never got talked about again. And that it was just wrong to me, because I am a talker. um, but yeah, that was a big thing for me, was who on earth do I go to help me be able to help him? Yeah.
And that's it, when he's and when I guess survivors are feeling so traumatized, possibly in the initial telling of you, he would have felt traumatized and terrified, but he would have felt so glad he'd got it out. That would have been
Mm.
hugely cathartic. But then, of course, it just got left sitting.
Yeah.
That's when it can revert back to don't ever speak of it.
Yes.
The reason
Yeah.
it didn't actually move into any healing was because it was too challenging for him.
Yes.
He was unable.
Yeah.
But I want to bring you back to a comment you made earlier, and thank you so much. You're doing great. By the
Thank you.
um, thank you. Is you talked about his parents and what they did, and we know that's minimizing. We've all moved on. There's nothing we can do, and that's almost, without trying to sound disrespectful, that's almost a convenient response, or a not in my backyard response, because they've got an adult son who's really struggling. So knowing the power of the parent, and we get that, parents give us permission or not to deal with something, don't they?
Mm. Mm.
What do you make of that?
Yes, definitely. I think he felt a responsibility to the family to get on with life. He had other issues in his life anyway. He was dyslexic. He had been quite a rebel when he was young. He was quite a handful for his parents. And so I could see he felt this kind of obligation to not be a nuisance to everybody anymore. It was very sad. I mean, I felt when I was engaged to him that there was something off, and I actually said to him, have you had a nervous breakdown? That was all I could put it down to. There was something just mentally that he didn't cope well with certain situations. He could go off, at the drop of a hat, get quite wound up and angry about things. Now I realize, that all makes sense. But I said to him, have you had a nervous breakdown or something's happened? No, I haven't. So I was actually also quite angry that no one had told me, that he hadn't told me before we got married. And I'm being honest here because that sounds a bit mean, but I was like, why didn't someone tell me, that this man has been damaged so much, and I'm taking this all on, and no one gave me a heads up. And he said to me, well, I didn't tell you because I thought you wouldn't want to marry me. And I said, well, there you go, you didn't give me the chance to make my own decision. So there was anger on my part as well that I had to just dampen down, and eventually just, no one wanted to know about that. I couldn't tell his family, hey, I'm angry. I'm angry at you all for not telling me. It was just a terrible situation, the things that come up in your mind that really, then you think, I felt bad, it was like, God, I'm being really harsh here, I'm being mean. It's him with the terrible thing that's happened to him, not me. So yeah, there's a lot of feelings that come up, and eventually, and I knew there was no way I could talk to his parents about that kind of thing.
Do you talked earlier about he was younger and he was a rebel. Can you recall what age he was when the abuse began?
Yes, he was around 10 to 12.
Okay, and was it male and female or just?
Yes, it was male and female doing it.
Yeah, so there you go. But, and of course, there's no permission for him as an adolescent, perhaps, or through his own shame and through what potentially mum and dad were able to manage, not permission for him to really speak of it, because it's confusing, it's embarrassing. And for our young boys and young adolescent males, Lee, they, what's wrong with you? Or aren't you lucky? Gosh, you've had an older woman or something. It's ridiculous. Things that are thrown out at our men about abuse. But the reality is, if I wound the clock back for you, and I know you said earlier you're going back 20 years, do you think you would have done anything differently?
Interesting question. Gosh, I don't know. I certainly would have understood our issues in our marriage a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't have been I don't know, because he still has not done anything about it. So I think he's chosen to live the rest of his life without doing anything about it. So I don't actually, it sounds really awful, but I think I might have left sooner. I think I hung in there a lot longer than was healthy for me, because it started to drag me down. That, of course, there were a lot of addictions. He had a lot of addictions too. So there was all this addictive behavior as well that I was thinking would eventually stop. So I know that's pretty brutal, but I should have really got out a bit sooner, because it was very hard on my health and my mental state as well. Yeah.
Did you feel, when you talk about addictions, of course we have food, alcohol, drugs, sex, what sort of addictions are we talking about?
Alcohol, cigarettes, and gambling started when we were married, which was kind of an escape. See, I would have understood the gambling more now, because at the time all I thought about was, oh, there's money going down the drain, Whereas now I can see it was escapism, and it was him being married was actually, it was quite difficult for him to be married. He thought it was going to be easier. So he was gambling to kind of escape the realization that he really shouldn't have got married,
Yeah.
without dealing with his issues, I think.
I was just going to
So,
say,
yeah.
I don't know if it's that he should have, it was on you as a couple or whatever, that he should have not have got married. I think it's probably more there was so much unresolved trauma. It was unlikely that a relationship, an intimate personal relationship, would stand a chance of success.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that sort of trauma. So,
Yeah.
if he dealt with that, yeah, he probably would have been a different person. you know.
Yes. Well, I know he felt quite a lot of guilt that he had married me, and that he realized I wanted to make goals and I wanted to travel overseas. There was things he just couldn't do. He just didn't have the nervous system for it. Life was difficult enough without doing more challenging things that I wanted to do. So I know he felt very guilty about the whole situation, which was dreadful because that just added to his load, of negativity and
Yeah.
yeah. Mm,
I suppose when you think about it too, because mum and dad maybe couldn't deal with it, he was left with it. And that was
mm,
kind of back in the days, where you didn't really talk about issues, you didn't really talk about mental health challenges.
mm,
Um, so
no.
talk us through kind of the impact on you trying to support the survivor, knowing that you couldn't speak of it. How,
Mm. The
how,
not being able to speak of it really, really got to me because I'm a talker. I'm a person who will um, share, and not with everyone, but I'll find someone and I'll try and resolve things, and I really want to get to the bottom of things and what's making something happen and how can we how can we resolve it. So that was, yeah, and to not be able to tell my friends, they could see that the marriage was not working out, and I couldn't tell them why. One of the main reasons. So it was isolating, actually. I felt very lonely in that marriage. Yeah, it was very isolating for me. Eventually, he did start telling people. So, out of the blue, we'd be having a dinner and he'd just tell a girlfriend of mine, and that was strange for me as well. In a way, it was like, well, this is good, but he seemed to just be telling people, but then definitely not doing anything about it. But he would just blurt it out sometimes. And the whole way through, I never really knew what the heck I was doing or what I was supposed to be doing. um, so yeah, it it was very difficult, and it was a relief to finally split for both of us.
yeah. And I guess too, I'm thinking about what, as survivors, what we do, and it's not just survivors, but there's something like 43 defense mechanisms us amazing human beings have, and we each adopt two or three that we use over and over. So one might be denial, just denial about anything to do with me.
Right.
Another might be to just get very angry and defensive.
Yeah.
Another might be to use humor. So there's
Mm.
lots of ways we defend against feeling overwhelmed or fearful. And it just sounds, as you're talking, Lee, like one of his might have been projection, because I've been writing notes as you've been talking, and what he's managed to do to you is he's managed to shut you down. So put it this way, he was shut down, and then what did he manage to do to you? Shut you down. he managed to, because he was feeling isolated as a child or as a survivor of this sexual abuse, you then start feeling isolated. Do you see
Mm.
where I'm going with
Yeah,
this?
yeah, I do.
So I wonder what other kind of impacts there were. You couldn't speak of it, you became isolated. Was there anger? Did you find he would get angry?
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, he'd get very angry. He would drink and just it would be like a switch flicked over between, one sip and the next. And I really did put up with a lot way too much bad behavior. Yeah, I really did. So yes, he got really angry with me. It was always my fault if we had a disagreement. But at the same time, I didn't know how to talk to him. I didn't know how to get the best
No.
out of the situation. And I know I would have said things that would have been just the wrong thing to say, but I just didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know where to get any help. And this was something that really stuck with me long after we split. Was gosh, there must be other people, so many other people in my situation trying to help, and how important I actually was in his life. I was a very important person. I was one of the closest people he had,
Yeah.
but I still couldn't help him. And in some situations, I was making things worse. Yeah.
Well, and it's exactly what had been done to him.
Mm. Yeah.
He didn't know how to help himself. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to be.
Mm.
And that's then where you ended up as well. And I think, you know, part of what we can do unconsciously as survivors is put our stuff onto those that are closest to us, or project all that out, or have you the bad guy, even though we will know full well at times that you're just not. But I guess I'm interested in, so never blame yourself. There were many strikes against you, Lee. You didn't have a willingness from your husband to ever seek help.
No.
So there's no way you can do it could
Mm.
have done it for him.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think for survivors watching, our beautiful survivor family out there watching us now, you know, guys, we can't expect our partners and families and friends to understand what it's like for us if we don't understand it ourselves, and they are not the right people to seek the help from. They are there to support and show us love, but the right people are the professionals, or in the field of this trauma, that can help us make sense of it all.
Yeah. I tell you another thing that's just occurred to me is the bad behavior that would happen, like if when he was drinking and then he would get angry and be quite mean verbally, just verbally, but just quite mean. I would actually make allowances for his bad behavior. Yeah, because I would think to myself, oh, he's had this terrible thing happen to him when he was young. He's been dealing with it all his life. He's carrying this terrible guilt. I'll let him off with that bad way he treats me, So it is not a healthy, it's not a healthy relationship when that sort of thing's happening. But I literally remember thinking that lots of times.
And
Yeah.
look, that's 100%. You see, now you wouldn't.
Because that wasn't helping him. It wasn't helping me, you know. Yeah.
But I think you've raised a really good point, because tell us a bit about that as a supporter. When you think about it, what behaviours would have helped, if any?
From me.
Yeah, as a supporter of a survivor, what behaviours when we as survivors aren't behaving well because we're traumatized or we don't know how to be, what would have helped? Like you're saying you wouldn't accept that behavior now because it didn't help.
Mm,
What would you do?
mm.
Yeah, I guess we're circling back
I
to what.
really don't know because he used to, I mean, it always happened when he was drinking,
Yeah,
and in the morning he would just deny having done anything wrong. And one thing I thought about doing was I said to him, I'm going to record you. I'm actually going to record you one night
yeah.
and play it back to you the next day and show you how badly you speak to me. And I never did it. And I don't I don't know if that's something people do, but I actually thought about it even after we split that well, I never did that. I never made him listen to how he spoke to me. Um, that was, I know, I just spoke to my sister-in-law recently and she said they used to come around for dinner and they would all see him speaking to me really badly after he'd had a certain amount to drink. She said, oh, he used to be so mean to you. And it really occurred to me that no one said anything to him, you know? Okay, they were in our home. They were probably scared to speak up, but I did wonder if it would make any difference if my friends and family had just, when he'd say something really rude, say, well, that was rude or that was mean. No one ever did. People were scared to say anything. So, yeah, what do you
Oh,
think of that?
yeah. Well, I guess as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking. So either they were trying to do what you had done, which is make allowances for him because of what he'd suffered, or they didn't want to get involved.
Mm. They didn't want to get involved because most of them didn't. There was only two people that knew. My brother and his wife knew what had happened, but other people didn't know what had happened to him. So, yeah, it's a really hard one.
It is.
I wonder now if, as a friend, if I heard a girlfriend's partner speaking really badly to her, I hope I will speak up and say something
Yeah, yeah,
and make him take ownership for what he's saying.
yeah.
Um, at some point, there has to be a recognition that you are affecting other people now with this hurt that you're carrying around. You're affecting other people who love you.
Well,
Um, yeah,
did you ever get to the bottom of why he would not get professional help? Did you ever get to the bottom?
never. It's interesting. Even after we split, I was still trying to help him and fix him because we were amicable. We were an amicable split, and I was still trying. I was still trying, banging on about get some help and try this and try that, and I've done this and I've done hypnotherapy, and maybe it would be good for you. And subtly just putting my little message in. And eventually he just said to me, no, I'm not interested. And I never found out. I did get the impression that to do the work was just more painful than actually living with the pain, which I thought, gosh, it just tells me how bad it is. He would rather live with this ongoing pain than deal with it. Hmm.
Did you guys have children? Were there children involved?
No, we didn't have children. Hmm.
Okay. So you didn't have to have that factor in and try and protect children as well.
No, I was very fortunate there. Yeah.
Yeah. So the enormity of the abuse for him became his life. He carried that.
Hmm.
Does probably, but the impact on you as a person who was married to him was to leave, which possibly because it felt so untenable. And
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
the fact that it had led to addictions as well. I really didn't want to live with a smoker. it was heavy smoking. I didn't want to live with someone who was drinking constantly, every day, quite heavy drinking. And I didn't want to live with someone who wasn't treating me very nicely. He could get very negative and unhappy about everything, really, not just me. Just could be someone on the TV, and they'd get an earful, and we'd be out in the car, and gosh, road rage was quite a thing. We'd be out for a nice evening, and it would turn, it would end up being a horrible evening. I just got tired of having. We were actually at a party, and it turned to custard. We had an argument, and I just thought to myself, I'm tired of really nice evenings and nice events ending up being an argument, and just feeling really horrible. And I realized I was worth more than that. I deserved better, and
Yeah.
I had to leave. Yeah.
That's tough. And yeah, I can see it would have been a really hard decision because, audience, what you don't know is that Lee, we are so grateful to Lee. She was our very first volunteer to board with Handing the Shame Back. And we're very grateful to you, Lee, for everything that you do for us. So you can see
Very
your
welcome.
heart is big and your intent has always been.
Mm. Yeah, oh, you're so welcome. I mean, it just stayed with me all these years that, I would really love to be able to help other people who were in the same situation as me, and also to let them know they're not alone. It never occurred to me at the time, which sounds funny now, but it never occurred to me there was other people in my situation. Even if that had occurred to me, I didn't know how to reach out to them. To be able to sit down and talk to someone else that was going through what I was going through would have meant so much to me. Yeah.
Oh, I totally get it. And look, one of the things we're doing this year is adding this to our offerings on the channel as well, which is resource for people supporting survivors through these interviews. So thank you, Lee. You're our first one.
Yeah.
And look, at the end of the day, the impact of this and the what you've had to try and navigate, I guess, and come to terms with, because it hasn't just been a one off incident. It sounds like trying to support a survivor who, I don't know, can't deal with it, is such a load in many ways. And you see the addiction, and you see the depression. And I guess, did you ever have occasions where you had to try and, explain to others what was going on or why it was so difficult?
Well, no, because it was this big secret. I didn't talk to anyone. I spoke to my sister-in-law, and even then, she had no experience in this situation. So, all I was doing was really just being able to offload to her, but I wasn't able to get any help from her. So, we were just floundering around. It explained, it gave me someone to talk to, but it wasn't someone who could actually say, look, here's what you could do, here's where you can get help. So yeah, it was pretty difficult. So sorry, I can't remember the question.
Oh, no, that's fine. You're doing great. And it's going to help so many of our wonderful supporters out there who are trying to find ways to show love and willingness to be alongside their survivor, family, friend.
Yeah, I have actually bought your second book, and I have got it for my ex or someone like him that's been through child sex abuse, and I have it here in my house. I have a spare copy. I've got one for me that I love to, I've read, and it's a great tool for me to then be able to see what what people need to go through when they're healing. But I've also got the spare copy in the hope that one day I can give it to him. He may say something to me that shows he's ready to do something about it, and I can say, hey, I've got a book.
It's fantastic. And thank you so much for reading it. One thing I have put up this year is I am offering group coaching to supporters of survivors, so that people can reach out and email through admin@gloriamasters.com, and we'll look at what you are needing. But we've got group sessions and individual sessions available for
Oh,
people.
that's so good, Gloria. I think that will be just really helpful for so many people, and they in turn will be able to be more help for the people in their lives that they're supporting. Yeah.
Look, I'm so grateful to you for sharing your experience, because there will be people watching, survivors as well as supporters of survivors, Lee, who get something from what you're talking about today. And I think that's the beauty of this, is that this is your experience, but there's probably 3 or 4 things you've said already that half the audience will go, oh, that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and as you say, it was a lonely place 20 years ago because there was nothing out there, and hopefully we're changing that. So,
Mm.
yeah, I guess the other thing is, when you consider it all now, do you ever look back and do that thing that sometimes we do, survivors and supporters, and think, that makes sense. That's why he would have behaved like that.
Oh, definitely. Yes. I mean, it wasn't until we'd split that I realized he couldn't trust me. When I say that about trust,
Yeah.
um, he didn't trust himself. There's no way he could really open up his heart and truly love, because he doesn't love himself at all. So I didn't know about all that kind of thing when we were together. So I've learned a lot more about it since we split, and we really needed to split for me to be able to process it and learn, because I was too much in it um, when we were married to really be able to um, see it from my own point of view. To be told, hey, you're making it all about you, that really made me back off when he said that. That was the point where I kind of gave up trying to understand, because I didn't like the thought that it was coming across as me making it about me. And it's possible that in a way I was, I don't know. But I've certainly learnt a lot since we split about, his not having self-love, not trusting himself, not being able to trust anybody in his life. There's no way we were really going to be able to be a really close unit, a close relationship like I actually have now. The anger, I can totally see the anger, that quick outburst of anger, the reliance on alcohol, some drugs, tobacco, cigarettes. Can totally understand that. It's very clear now to me what was going on. But at the time when I was in the marriage, that is very difficult to be able to process things when you're in it.
You can't. And Lee, you brought up a couple of things. So there's about 11 hallmarks of child sexual abuse, in my opinion, and you've mentioned 2. One is trust and the other is self-love. And 100%, a survivor will never trust easily. Never.
Mm. No.
That's all I need to say about that, because look what's happened, and the
Yeah.
coercion and the manipulation and the kind of stealth around abusing a child like your ex would have had to have been pretty high. So we will always struggle with trust. Trust is always going to be a big thing. And the other is self-love. If we can't love who we are, there's no way we can love fully and completely, which was your experience. So for fabulous supporters watching, it's not about you that the lack exists, but that can feel like it is about you.
Mm.
If the survivor is unaware of what they are bringing to this.
Mm.
I think that's really important, because it's very hard. It's much easier for us to put it all on you or blame you for everything than look in the mirror and think, hey, maybe I am struggling with loving myself or trusting or whatever it happens to be. So I think, yeah. Does that make
Yes.
sense to you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, when you're with someone who's been through child sex abuse, there's ways that they cope in life, and they just don't seem, for someone who hasn't been through it, it just doesn't kind of almost make sense, and there's that disconnect, when he would just disconnect, and like he could watch a program about someone else that had been sexually abused and not be upset at all. And I'd be very upset. I'd be sitting there, crying or something. And he'd just be like a stone. And I remember this actually happened, and me saying to him, "Don't you find this really upsetting to watch?" And he was like, "Why?" And so you're always got these things happening that are just, you feel you would react in a certain way, and here's this person that's actually been through it, and they're acting quite differently, and you just can't relate. It's pretty strange at times. Yeah.
Well, look at what you've managed to do. You've managed to turn that corner, leave to protect who you are, and also come back into this whole arena by wanting to give back and help others who are trying to support their survivors. So thank you so much, Lee.
Oh, pleasure.
Look, we're just as we're moving into close, is there anything that you haven't shared with us, or any other words of wisdom you would like to give to us?
I would say never give up. I have not given up on my ex being able to find peace. If he comes to me when we're blimmin' 80 years old, I'm going to be saying, "Yay!" I've been waiting for you. Yeah, never give up.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Hey, audience, we're very lucky, and I'm so grateful to Lee, because this affords us an insight into what our beautiful supporters sometimes have to experience and see, and just the generosity of this woman, and not just dealing with what she had, sharing it with us, but also helping us at handing the shame back and in her voluntary capacity. So thank you. Lee, stay there. As we're closing out, team, thank you for joining us. Don't hesitate to reach out with any comments. And if you would like to be considered as a supporter of a survivor, please feel free to reach out. In the meantime, please know you are seen, you are believed, and I stand beside you. And finally, please like, subscribe, and share this video.